Hi, this is Tutor Nick T, and this is lesson 184. Uh, part one, actually. Today we're going to have a part one and a part two. Uh, the title of today's lesson is Common Everyday Abbreviations, Uses and Meanings. Yeah, these are abbreviations we see very often in English and written English, and not everybody knows what all of them actually stand for. So I'm just going to review them. Maybe you do know most of these, or maybe you know half of them. But anyway, let's cover it. So let's look at the first one, AD. Now, I'm sure everybody's familiar with it. And if you ask the average person what does it stand for, actually in the States, when I heard, well, if you ask the average person what it stands for, most people usually say after death. Because AD and BC goes together. Most people know BC stands for before Christ. After death is actually not correct. A lot of these abbreviations actually do come from Latin. So AD actually stands for Anno Domini, all right, Latin. And in Latin, it means year of God, which, to be honest, it makes more sense because I remember growing up thinking, well, AD shouldn't really be right because if AD meant after death, then it should really be beginning around 30 something AD. So actually it makes sense. So AD means year of God, meaning the year that God or Jesus is supposed to be born. So that's what AD actually stands for. All right, and let's give an example. Remember EG, we're going to be covering EG. EG actually stands for example. The colonies declared independence from Britain in 1776 AD. All right, good. Let's look at the next one. Uh, BC, of course, BC and AD goes together. So BC is before the year zero. Of course, it does originally stand for before Christ. And that's one of the reasons why some people thought AD might actually stand for after death. They didn't realize that it comes from Latin. Okay, so let's look at the first example here. Alexander the Great died in 323 BC. So, yeah, like minus 323. 323 BC. All right, good. All right, now here's a couple of other ones that's also related to AD and BC. The first one is BCE. What does BCE stand for? It stands for Before Common Era. Actually, BC just means this. BCE means exactly the same thing as BC. But here's a note here. It's used mostly by some non-Christians. Yeah, I remember the first time I came across it, and I thought to myself, when I realized what it stood for, well, why do you need BCE and CE when you already have AD and BC? And I kind of suspected it might have been for this reason. So, to be honest, I don't see it a lot. I see it in probably less than 1% of all articles and stuff that's written out there. So it's still not really, really common. The only thing that you should note is you should focus on what it means. BCE actually is the same as BC. CE is the same thing as AD. But I would probably avoid using it a bit. I guess there is a chance that some Christians actually might be a little offended because it seems like you're going way out of your way to not want to use the meaning of Christ or after death of Christ. A little bit like the X sometimes in Xmas. Sometimes you hear that some Christians don't really like, if they had a Christmas card that said Xmas, for the same sort of reason. This might even be a little worse because it seems like you're going much more out of your way. Your whole life when you were growing up and throughout the world, everybody knows BC and AD. That's been standard for a long, long time. It doesn't matter what your religion is. Everybody uses BC and AD to refer to that time period. Okay, let's go on. Let's go to the next one. AM. AM, time. We see this all the time. Everybody knows AM. Everybody knows how to use AM. Definitely all native speakers do. This one also comes from Latin, but in Latin it stands for ante meridian. And that directly translated to English, that means before midday. So before 12, I guess 12 p.m. So that's me, ante meridian. This is another one that even though most native speakers know it and know how to use it, if you ask the average American on the street, what does AM stand for? I don't think most would be able to say anti-meridian. I think definitely less than 50%. I wouldn't be surprised if it was about 80 or 90% did not know this. But anyway, it's just good to note it. Let's see an example with it. He wakes up at 7 a.m. every morning. Yeah, of course, we use it all the time. I wouldn't be surprised if you ask some, average person on the street, what does AM stand for? They'll say, it stands for something? AM? It's the time. It's AM. It's always AM. You might get a response like that. I wouldn't be surprised. All right, let's look at the next one. PM. PM is the opposite. PM actually stands for post-meridian. So after midday. Okay, good. Yeah, so just the total opposite. So of course after 12, after 12 p.m., the afternoon. So here's the example. She gets off work at 5 p.m. every day. All right, good. Most people should know this. All right, let's look at the next one. CV. CV. Mostly British use. Literally stands for curriculum vitae, also from Latin. Yeah, again, like I said, British use. Literally translated back to English, it means like course of life. In American English, we tend to use the French word. We use resume. So, of course, if you're going for a job, you might need if you're British, you need your CV. If you're American, you use your resume. Somebody said, do you have your resume? So, of course, that's the listing of all the previous jobs you had, your education, any other skills or talents you have, and so on. Okay, good. CA is the next one here. A lot of times you see CA actually written as circa, but you might see the abbreviation sometime. It means around or about, and it's mostly used with dates. So used to show dates are close but not exact. Yeah, so they don't really know the exact date, but they're kind of guessing, and it's their best guess of around the time it is. So a lot of times, if you do see circa or CA, it's often a round number, like they'll say, 500 BC. They don't say 502 CA with 502 that much, or circa 502. They're more likely to say 500 or 490. They're more likely to keep it a round number, like on the tens or something. Okay, good. And here's an example. They believed he died circa 300 BC. All right, good. All right, now, ironically, we have the abbreviation for example. This one sometimes confuses someone because the EG doesn't look like it should stand for example. I've sometimes seen some native speakers actually write EX. And to be honest with you, logically, from a Western point of view, I wouldn't be surprised a lot of people think it should be EX, it's example. But it's not, it's EG. EG is for example. Okay, so EG means for example. This one also comes directly from Latin. So this is the reason we use EG, because it stands for exempli gratia. That's the EG. So the EG comes from that, comes from the Latin. All right, so, and translated from the Latin, it means like for the sake of an example, but usually we just say for example. Okay, good. And I have an EG for EG, so an example for meaning for example. Several presidents of the U.S. were assassinated. The EG is, for example, Lincoln, JFK, etc. Okay, and I'm using the same example here as for the last one because we have both EG and etc. in the same sentence. Etc. we see it all the time. This is one of those ones that you cannot pronounce as ETC. You have to say the full word etc. Although you rarely see the full word written out. Sometimes I've seen some people write the full word out as a single word, but technically it really should be two words from Latin. Et in Latin means and cetera means the rest. So that's why it's always used after a series. You mention like 1, 2, 3 things, and then you might say etc. Meaning you could name a lot more, but you don't want to bore the person or bore the reader by naming all of them. So basically it means and the rest or and so on. Okay, good. I hope you got it. I hope it was informative. And I guess look forward to part 2. Thank you for your time. Bye-bye.